Ladies and gentlemen, K Kim here. Hope you guys had good day trading today. Market is down 0.47% at close. At one point, market was up quite a bit. As you can see, this was today, this morning. We initially gapped up and then we faded. And we filled that gap entirely today. And then we hung there a little bit. Towards the end of the day, we saw continuation to the downside. And yet again, we're here at 285. And this is the level that we've been talking about because, again, you can see that bears coming back down to challenge this gap area now, right? Last time it was open was what? It was yesterday, it was Thursday. We rallied, gapped up. Today, you can see that bears came down and challenged in this vicinity. So we've actually seen this kind of activity in the market pretty much throughout this month. Let's go to here. We've been seeing a lot of gap ups and gap downs throughout the month of April, right? We've seen a lot of big gap ups. We've also seen gap downs. And you can see here even April 6th, right? This is April 6th. We gapped up on April 7th. We initially pulled back, got up, came down. We completely filled the gap. And you can see that that gap was completely filled. And so a lot of times when the gap gets filled, it does act as support. And so you can see that we had a, inverted hammer type of candle there. We saw follow through to the upside. We continued higher. And we gapped up once again. So you can see we gapped up on April 7th, failed. We filled that gap. We gapped up again April 9th. Failed. We filled that gap again. We gapped up again April 14th. This time it didn't fail. We actually held on that day, April 14th. But next day we came down. We gapped it down. So this turned it into a island top, which we talked about. And then we gapped up again. And then came down again. We gapped down again. So it's been gapping up, failing, gapping up, failing. Same thing happened here. We gapped up and something changed, I think, around late April 24, right? So we gapped up, and this is a pretty sizable gap. And this was after all these up and down shenanigans here, you can see, right? We initially got up, right? And we kind of grinded higher. Next day, we gapped up again, right? That's 23rd. We failed and filled that gap. So I think this is the only time where we gapped up, we held it, we saw continuation, right? So throughout the month of April, we've been seeing gapping up, failing, gapping up, failing, gapping up, next day fail, gapping up, next day fail, gapping up, next day gapping up again, pulling back, but held. We never filled that gap or gap down below it. We held here for another day. We got up here and gapped up. So entirety of this April, we've been seeing a lot of gappy actions. And this is the only time we saw on April 21st where we saw a gap that remains open. We held above it, and then we saw another gap. So you can see that these two gaps still open. So we gapped up yesterday, and then today we gapped up again, and it failed. And then we're now retesting 285. So again, this is why the gap bear is important, because that area is going to act as support. This is what bears want to see. What bears want to see is, again, this is what we've been talking about last couple of days. Bears want to see it gapping it down. That way, they can turn this into a island top reversal. And if that happens, we're probably going to come back down to retest that 277 area. And that's a pretty big gap. That's a pretty sizable gap. And bears probably want to challenge that gap. But if bears start to fizzle to the downside, we have that rising, I believe that's 30 EMA, the short-term moving average. And then when the gap gets filled, that's going to act as pretty strong support, at least in the short term, because that's a prior resistance. And that's a rising short-term moving average. And then that's a gap fill area, right? So, do we have rising uptrend support here also? Okay, that's what we're holding right now. Okay, so we got couple supports that we're working with. We got that, that rising uptrend support here, here, here. We got that gap area, right? And that's where we found at least little support there. And pretty much we've been hanging around throughout this vicinity. Buyers been protecting this level, making sure that bears are not bringing this down lower than this vicinity. This is what I mean, is that if it will be difficult for the bears to try to just bring it down, because we got this gap at 285, we got this rising shorter term moving average there around 283, and then we got the gap fill support at 282, which is a prior resistance and support. So we got a lot of gaps in this vicinity. That's why the fastest way for the bears to bring it down will be if they gap it down, turn this on an island top, then there's a good chance we're going to come down, retest at 279.91, that longer term moving average there, and then we'll be sitting at about 277 there, right? So that will be the best way for the bears. For the buyers, we want to make sure, buyers want to make sure that, you know, bears do not, obviously, you know, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow morning or next day, but if bears bring it down, you want to make sure you defend this level, 285, 282. There's a lot of support in that vicinity. Again, rising support, that we got that rising, moving average, and also so there's a lot of this support. And there, if bears start to bring it down without gapping it down, there's going to be a lot of buyers looking to buy the dip in that vicinity. Keep that in mind. If we zoom out a little bit, we're still cultivating, right? Higher highs and higher lows, and we've been talking about this entire of this month of April, that when you see higher highs and higher lows cultivation happening, you always want to give benefit of doubt to the buyers, and that's that we are still in an uptrend. Until that sequence break, we are still in an uptrend. Not to mention that longer term moving average, this is sitting at 279. That's still rising here, and that's been acting as a pretty strong support. We still got this rising pivot, and that was the pivot that really brought this back up, because remember last time, that was a pretty sizable gap down, and that was island top, and that was a big gap down along with the island top. I actually thought that there's a good chance this could actually break below that, but right at that level, we had that rising pivot, and also that longer term moving average coinciding. That's why when you see technicals colliding, coinciding like that, you want to pay attention. And that's kind of what I mean in the shorter term here. We got all these technicals colliding in this vicinity. This is the only way the bears really make this work, to bring it down to 270s. They have to gap it down, right? If not, there's going to be a lot of dip buyers waiting to buy that dip. Let's look at the oscillator now. We talked about this last night. And we said that, I said that yesterday, we were right at that overbought level, right? You can see that bulls are taking some rest, right? We see that it's not breaking, but it's turning lower. And with the price turning lower, bulls are taking a rest. But just because that's at overbought level does not mean it has to roll over. Remember we talked about that? Because last time we saw that here and here, right? And we did see some up and down moves, but you can see how buyers continue to make higher lows after certain pullbacks. So we don't know right now that if this is going to come all the way down to the oversold level, or we're going to come down here halfway and then gap back up and start oscillating back and forth at the top of his band. We don't know that. So we're going to continue to watch this level here. We're going to continue to see how the oscillator behave. I'll come back to you guys tomorrow and see if these levels are holding, or if the bears are able to bring it down or gap it down. If not, these 285, 282 level is going to be the level to watch, and current support is this rising support there. So we'll see how it plays out tomorrow, and I'll update you guys on this tomorrow. You guys have a wonderful evening, and good luck trading tomorrow.